Hi everyone, Magnus here, and in today's video I'm going to be doing a recap of a 5-game Blitz match that was just played between myself and chess streamer Hannah Sayce last weekend. And the idea is that I'm going to be sharing my thoughts about what I was thinking about during the game live, as well as sharing some live clips from Hannah's stream herself so that you guys can follow the descent of a chess player into the madness of just one more game.
Okay, one more.
All right, now diving into game number one. I have the white pieces here. I was randomly paired in a 3-minute blitz game against Hannah. I had no idea that this was how the next 30 minutes of my day was about to be spent. But I started with pawn to e4, and she went pawn to c5. E4 is my main weapon. I have dabbled with knight to f3, and I mean dabbled, I've played knight f3 a significant amount. A lot of OTB games with knight f3 as well. At the same time, I have played a little bit of c4, but mostly e4 and knight f3. She plays the Sicilian, which tries to stop me from putting a d-pawn in the center, but now I play c3 to prepare to put my d-pawn fully in the center. She plays knight f6, attacking my e-pawn. I push it forward, kick her knight, and pieces continue to develop. I defend my pawn, which she puts some pressure on. I attack the knight falls back, attacks my bishop. The bishop gets kicked back again. And as you may notice, this bishop has moved around a significant amount, and normally that's not good in the opening, but at the same time, her knight's been retreating. She's extended a pawn, which could become a liability with b3 later on in the game. So really, this is all theory and not a problem for white. Now, you might notice as this video goes on that a lot of the positions get repeated, and for that reason, I'm going to be speeding through the openings in the later games so that you guys don't get bored. Okay, so d6, she tries to destabilize my e-pawn. I captures and castle. She plays the bishop out. I bring my rook to the semi-open file so that it can put some pressure on this e-pawn. If the pawn ever goes to e6, there's often some tactics on the d5 and f5 squares where you might be able to get a pawn there, or potentially a bishop there, or a knight. And that way the pawn will be pinned. Okay, she plays e6. Now you might be wondering why I didn't play h3. h3 is a move you can throw in basically at any time, and it's a decent move, but you don't really have to rush with it. It doesn't really matter. I play b3, tripping away at the c4 pawn. She goes bishop e7, and now I throw in h3 and knight to a3. Now this is a very standard idea in this opening. You want to attack this c4 pawn before black gets a chance to castle, and if black captures, you'll take with the a pawn, play pawn d4, unleash the double bish from its hibernation. You don't even have to develop off the c1 square, sorry, and you'll have a great position. As well as that, there's knight b5, knight c7 ideas with the knight going to a3, so the knight's doing a lot of stuff. She decides to play knight to a5, which is apparently a mistake. I should have taken here, and I guess taken with my knight, and then played something like d4. No, bishop a4 check. Okay, that makes a lot of sense. Basically, the king has nothing to block anymore, and we just have to move. I didn't spot this during the game. Instead, I saw this idea with pawn to b4. Sorry, knight to b4, knight b5. And after the queen moves back, I saw pawn to a4, and I wanted to go b4 and a5, as well as retreat this knight to the center, which would be supported by the other knight with potentially pawn g4 in the future. Although this is apparently just terrible. If she captures here, and then I think takes on f3, because let's say this captures, bishop f3. If I take with my queen, I guess, oh yeah, the bishop would just be hanging, so I'd have to take with my pawn here, which would be quite ugly. She didn't go for this though. Instead played knight c6. I played a5, which was the plan. I wanted to push these pawns. She captured in between move, which is the only move, by the way. If you try and move your knight away, then the c4 pawn will die. So, she does capture in between, good move. But then plays this pretty strange move, which I can show you her reaction to in the game. Knight takes a5 is very suspicious.
The takes, I have takes. No, I don't. I'm kidding. That was a good one. It was a good joke. It's actually a really good sacrifice.
So unfortunately, we can all agree that knight takes a4 was in fact not a good sacrifice. But at the same time, it actually took me quite a few seconds to register that that was a free piece. I think it took me something like 6 seconds. I was pretty confused because I guess my subconscious hadn't registered that knight takes a5 was possible, guarded by the rook. But I think I was actually pretty close to moving the bishop to a4 or something. I don't even know. But yeah, often hanging free pieces at this level actually do slip by because people aren't expecting them to happen, which is pretty bad. Definitely got a little bit too close to not taking the free knight for me there. But I did end up taking the free knight, and she played bishop d8, which is an interesting move, trying to set up some discoveries against my rook and say that my rook is kind of paralyzed defending the knight, which does make my life a little bit difficult. She was pointing out, I think, later on in her video that you can play knight d6 and win the bishop, which is probably simpler than what I did, but I wanted to go for the kill. I went for bishop to a3 here, skewering down this diagonal, preventing the black king from castling and threatening knight to d6. She moves her knight back, preventing the knight from going into d6. And she was pointing out that knight d6 is still possible as there is bishop takes h5. But I decided to look for better and played knight to c7 check, which is in fact the best move because after, so you'd say queen takes, I have bishop to a4 check. And look at this killer bishop pair. You have to block with the queen, and after you block with the queen, I would actually just take your bishop on h5, and the queen is still dead because there's no b4, and the rook from all the way over here would defend the pawn. Now this would have been a nice line. Unfortunately, it didn't happen. She just took the bishop, and I played bishop to a4, winning the queen. She retreated her bishop back. If you were to take my rook, I would take your queen, and after takes, there would be queen a4, and I would win this bishop too. So we do get this, and the game is pretty much over. I was quite happy with the conversion though. I moved my pieces, sacrificed the rook, as Levi Roseman would say, and delivered a check, brought my other rook into the game. Queen e7, and I hunt down the horsey on d7, prying the king's cold dead hands from the horse. So the king moves over, I exchange the rooks, win the horse, and here I start delivering some checks, collecting the pawns. But I was getting pretty low on time right around here. So I'll just show you guys the live clip as we blitz through the next moves.
Yeah, I was trying to flag them, but it's not happening. GG's, GG's.
All right, now jumping into game number 2, she starts with pawn to e4, and I respond with a Sicilian defense, going for my accelerated dragon setup that I have been peddling pretty frequently in the YouTube series. But she goes for the Maroczy bind with pawn to c4, and this is often an accelerated dragon's absolute nightmare. But if you're gonna play the accelerated dragon, you got to learn to love the bind. You got to learn to love the struggle, and you have to know knight to f6. Because if you don't know knight f6, honestly, I think your positions are just going to get terrible. Because on knight to c3, you can capture this knight in between. Now d6 is the trappy line because d6 there's bishop to e3, knight g4, and black wins because after something like takes, you can take the queen, and this is the best option for white, but black's better because black has the two bishops. And often I get games that go like bishop g4, queen b6, and something like knight c6, queen takes f2 is a checkmate. So she didn't go for this. Well, I didn't go for this trick because I assumed she'd be familiar. But I take in the center, and after queen takes, I play d6, and we get the classic Maroczy bind setup. She goes queen d2 rather than bishop to e2. Bishop e2 is the main move, so I was a bit confused here. But at the same time, she goes f3, and I think this setup might be a bit inaccurate, but didn't really punish it. We ended up transposing into the regular setup, and after b3, I go for this well-known a6 b5 plan. And the point is that after b5, this is still book apparently, even though it's just good for black. Knight d5 is the best move. But the point is that after something like captures, and bishop captures, there's rook takes on c3, taking the knight. And if the other capture happens, which is what happened in the game, she took with the knight, then you can exchange the queens. And even though she takes my rook, I can recapture with the bishop and then take the pawn on a2 with a skewer across the two bishops. After rook d1 here, I went on a pretty deep think because I was trying to remember, and then after I couldn't remember, I was trying to come up with what the best continuation here was, because I was sure that black was much, much better. So I ended up coming up with bishop to e6 after about a minute, which is honestly just terrible for Blitz. You shouldn't do that. Because I was thinking about knight c3, rook b2, I was thinking about knight d4 guarding the pawn, and I saw that after knight c3, rook b2, I was probably going to get to this pawn eventually, even though because the rook can't move, because then I would take the bishop. And on knight to d4, I had spotted this tactic of knight takes e4, sacrificing the horsey, and going after this bishop here, as well as attacking the knight. So she took my bishop. If you were to take the horse, I would take your bishop, and then I would take your pawn, and then the rook would move, and I'd take your other bishop, and everything would collapse. I don't know why this thing keeps popping up saying there's an error classifying the move. It seems like it's a blunder. So knight d4, I take in the center. She takes, I take the bishop. She takes my bishop. I take with the king. And we emerge a pawn up with rook b2 coming and going after this pawn here, which is really hard to defend, as well as the later idea that I used to go d5 and block the bishop from defending once the pawn gets too far. So the pawn does get quite far. Apparently, I had a knockout punch with knight to b1 going to c3, which is really nice. If the bishop were to go here, knight c3, and I would have collected the pawn. I didn't spot that, unfortunately, and I played d5 with a pretty similar idea, which is I want to get to the pawn, but I'm going to do it by blocking, blocking the bishop's view, and then bring the king. However, this will leave me in only a pawn-up rook endgame. So king f6 was a bit of a waiting move, but then after this exchange, I do gather the pawn, but it's a pawn up rook endgame, but her king has wandered all the way away from the defense of the pawns. She has to go back, do passive defense with the rook. I start playing h5, bringing my king, h4, and I'm just trying to clamp down really on the white position. So yeah.
Let's hope they're really bad at endgames. Okay, let's just pray.
She does mention that she hopes that I'm bad at the endgame, but unfortunately, I don't think I'm that bad. And even if I was, this endgame is pretty nice and easy to win, with the rook being so passive and behind the pawns. So I really think that the technique for winning this shouldn't be too bad. She does play g4, but I just move the king back. Of course, always en passant, always en passant. Unfortunately, this would have landed me in a drawn position, so you can't always en passant when it's offered. But the nice thing is that this pawn on h4 acts as a hook to stop the pawn on h2 moving forward. So I'm just going to rattle through the rest of the moves. King f6, she moves her rook to the defense of the h-pawn. I play g5, just trying to lock things down, and my plan is I'm going to try and kick the king back and then make inroads with my own king. She plays a defensive move, trying to get the pawn on h3 to a guarded square. Unfortunately, that pawn is now a forever weakness, and with the king unable to move back and defend the pawn without my king coming in and taking this f-pawn, it's getting really, really hard to defend. I give a check, I then give another check before noticing I can go back and win the h3 pawn. As Ben Feingold says, always repeat when you're unsure, especially in the endgame. You want to take it slow and you don't want to make any crazy decisions. So I just play the natural moves here, guarding my pawn. I collect this pawn, I then move my king up, move the rook around, and I'm just going to, actually in this specific check, the rook is now trapped on h5. So after rook h5, I defend it with my rook going to a5, and she tries to bring her king, but I deliver this check here. Now I create myself the two outside passed pawns that can move down the board pretty easily and become queens. and after the king comes up, kicking the rook down, I bring my rook back so that I can block checks with the rook and then use the rook behind the passed pawn to escort the pawn forward. And then I lock everything down with pawn to f4. And the idea behind this is I don't really care if she goes and takes this pawn, because this is a winning king and pawn in game, being up a pawn. So if she does get closer, I move my king in. But she decides not to take, because if she were to take, this would be an easy win for black. I have an extra tempo, and I will get to the pawn in time and just move the king out of the way and promote. So instead of that, she doesn't take, but then I just push my pawn all the way forward and end up with this nice little connect 3 chain, before promoting to a queen, sacrificing a queen newly minted on the h1 square. But after the exchange, I just move my king around, claim the opposition, grab the pawn, and promote. And I think she loses on time here. I was actually getting pretty low, 0.8 seconds, almost flanked that. So definitely a little bit slow. I think I was playing not on my laptop, so I don't know if I had multiple previews enabled, which is definitely a little bit of a scary situation to be in when low on time. So this is actually me coming back from the end of the video. I just finished recording and it ended a little bit over half an hour, and I did think that would be potentially be a little bit on the long side, so I'm thinking of releasing this as 2 parts, which might be a little bit more consumable for you guys, as half an hour is a little bit on the long side. So for that reason, I do hope you enjoyed this part 1 of 2, and if you did, please do consider liking and subscribing, and I will see you all you guys in the next video. Bye!